Everyone, this is Lulu from As You Wish Pottery, and in this video we'll be painting this super cute freshly squeezed orange juice pitcher. Grab all your supplies and let's get started. Alrighty, so we're going to start by painting the background of the outside of the jar. So keep in mind that we're going to do a bit of a watercolor background. So what that means is we're going to dilute our paint with water. So you'll see that I start off with just adding a few droplets from my brush, but because of the amount of paint I have on my paint palette, I'm going to pour in a little bit more. I want the consistency to be really loose, to be kind of milky, to make it so the paint kind of moves on its own and I don't really have to do much. So you'll see I add some water in there, but before I put it onto the piece itself, make sure that it's stirred really well so the consistency of both is even, and so I get the best result when I'm painting. So the way I'm painting is just by tapping my brush onto the surface, just letting the paint kind of pool on its own, creating kind of a wave effect on its own. I'm going halfway on the jar and I'm not painting anything past that. So keep in mind that when I'm stirring or when I'm mixing my paint like this, I make sure to do it in small amounts just in case I need more of the color later on. I can still use more if I need more. So just be aware of that. Try to mix your paint with small amounts first, and then if you need more, you got more, so you can keep going that way. Alrighty, so I'm painting towards the edge of where I'm going to stop painting yellow, and then once I have a really nice surface that I like, once all my lines kind of look, there's no real lines dripping, I'm trying to cover all those drippage lines just that way they don't overlap weirdly. So you'll see that I'll go around and make sure to pick up any lines that are left over or anything that's dripping like that. And then you'll also see that I'm doing another layer. So this layer is just as messy as the first. I just want to make sure that that yellow comes out really bright and colorful, and that it stands out on its own. Also, it creates a really nice variance of textures when you have kind of two layers on there. Don't paint it exactly the same. Leave some spaces unpainted, leave some gaps in between. This will just add more to the effect. And remember, you're not really brushing in your paint, you're kind of just dabbing it on and letting it kind of flow on its own and overlap itself on its own. So it's going to move a little bit, keep that in mind. So you do have to be vigilant, and you do have to kind of hold your piece and make sure that you're stirring it, or not stirring it, I'm sorry, make sure that you're rotating your piece. Make sure that whenever you're picking up your paint, you're stirring it really well, so that way you're picking up the mixture and consistency as you like it, or as it should be. And then once we're done, we're going to rinse off our brush and we're going to repeat this with the color Orange Crush. So I'm doing the same thing I did. Now I'm just going to paint the bottom half of my pitcher using the same technique with a little bit of water. Here I'm using a sponge because it was just quicker for me to pour it on. If you have a small cup, you could do that. If you have anything like a small thing, would just be fine. Pouring it on as well is just fine. And remember, we're looking for a really soft, watery consistency. So this is going to be kind of a messy painting, but once it all ties in together, it'll look really great. So keep in mind, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Just make sure that you tap your brush so that way there's no actual strokes and everything's just kind of little blobs that have different variances in their darkness or their coats, right? And then once I'm done with the first go around, I'll go again over everything. But this second time, I'm going to make sure that my top and my middle, or the top and the bottom intercept. Yeah, they just sit on top of each other in the middle in a comfortable way. I'm just trying to make sure that once the piece is fired, you can see a really nice gradient from the yellow to the orange, and it doesn't look like some weird stop, you know? So we're just overlapping the paints with just a little bit of the coats, just going over everything, making sure that everything's bright and colorful and even. Alrighty, so the next step is totally optional. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But what we're going to do now is we're going to splatter the inside of the jar using a little bit of water yolk and a little bit of orange crush. I'm using the same medium brush, and what I'm doing is dipping my brush in paint, putting the brush inside the pitcher, and with my index finger, I'm pulling the bristles back to just get the paint to go everywhere inside of the jar. I'll also do a little bit of that on the outside. I don't think it really shows that brightly, but it just adds an extra level of texture to the watercolor that I enjoy. So this is also not a big deal if you don't want to do it. Alrighty, so next I'm going to use the pencil to lightly sketch the oranges. We're going to create some circles and then some sliced halves, and we're going to make some of them larger and some of them smaller. Just keep in mind, if you look at the sample in the lesson plan, you can kind of see that everything really starts with a round shape. For me, I don't really try to make things difficult when I'm drawing. I try to make them as simple as possible. It'll just make it easier for painting as well. So the idea is to get some small somewhat small circles, some medium-sized ones, and then some half circles, just all over the picture. And then once I have my oranges figured out, I'm gonna add flowers. So the flowers just pretty much fit wherever there's a gap, wherever there's enough space. Don't try to force them. If they don't fit, they don't fit, and that's okay. And then don't forget to also add stems and leaves to all the oranges. And I added smaller sized leaves around the flowers, and it's no big deal if you don't want to do these now. You can also do them when you're painting them, so that way you kind of have a better idea once you put some background color on things, okay? So this part is going to be pretty easy, pretty basic. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because all the pencil marks will disappear after everything is fired. So this is just for you to know how to get started and how where your shapes are going to be. I try to use it as a guide, so that way I know like how much space I have, and then once I start painting, I can make adjustments from there. So it's the same rule. Just mind that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to make sure that you have an idea on where things will be, and then from then on out, you're good to go. Remember, if you need any help, you can also look at the lesson plan. I have both the front and the back side, or the left and the right side on there. And the pattern just pretty much goes on randomly. I really didn't have I didn't have any actual planning on the sizes and the fruits. I just made it so the ones that I was going to paint the insides on were a little bit larger, and the ones that were just going to be round were a little bit smaller. That's honestly the only thing that I kept in mind while I was sketching these out. Alright, so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start painting my oranges. So I'm just going to start off with the larger ones first, the ones that are not the ones cut in half. Because I'm using my medium round brush. So I would suggest, if you have a medium brush, start with your larger ones. If you have a smaller brush, you can start wherever you like, really. And then we'll do the smaller half sizes later on with another brush. So for now, just go in and paint your circles. They're the easiest part. And I would do about 1 to 2 coats for these guys, just to ensure that they come out really bright and that we can see them behind or on top of the yellow and the orange underneath. So because the yellow and orange underneath are lighter because they're watered down, right? The orange is going to pop out best, and we want to give it the most chances as possible So we're going to make sure that we do 2 good coats on there. So what that means is just paint all the circles around on 1 coat and then go through everything again and give it a second coat. All right, so here you'll see that I decided to change to a smaller brush. So all I did was just grab a smaller detail brush. If you have a brush pack, it's just any of the smaller brushes. And then you can just go in and paint the half oranges with about 1 to 2 coats of orange crush as well. I found it easier to do those smaller half circles with the detail brush. So you're more than welcome to do them with that brush, or if you have a small brush, you can also do that as well. So whatever's easiest for you, go for it. Alrighty, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna give our oranges a little bit more texture, a little bit more of a variance of shade, so that way they don't look like just one simple solid color. So what I'm doing right now is I'm mixing a little bit of orange, a little bit of red, and I'm going to make a darker orange, right? And with this darker orange, I'm just gonna give all the oranges a bit of a shadow, right? To give it more of a rounded texture. So that just means that I'm not painting, not brush stroking. I'm just lightly tapping my brush onto the surface. I'm trying to go in the shape of a half circle or a half moon kind of circle. And my goal here is just to give the oranges a little bit of an extra touch, a little bit of an extra color. You don't have to do it to all the oranges. You could do it to the ones that are not going to have the cuts or the accents inside. You can totally do it to the ones that are just going to stay round, so all the small ones, or you can do it to the other ones too. It's really up to personal preference, and the goal is just to give the orange a little bit of an extra darker tone, right? So don't worry if it's not perfect or if it doesn't look right, because the idea of it is that it should be natural. So it's okay if they don't all look the same, is what I'm trying to say. It's totally okay. So after I did all my little extra accents with that darker orange, I'm going to grab some of the red again, and this time I'm going to use my detail brush, and I'm just going to paint little dots accenting that shadow area. This is just going to create those little pores that the oranges have. It just gives it an extra fun accent to have. Also, it lays really nicely on top of the orange and the red that are on there, right? And for these ones, I'm only doing them on the small oranges. I'm not doing it on the bigger ones, just because the bigger ones will have other accents on them. So don't worry about those. Just focus on the ones that are going to be completely round. Alrighty, so now I'm using a detail brush, and I'm going to be painting the flowers using Polar Bear. So all I'm doing here is 5 petal flowers. If you painted with me before, you know I find the easiest way to do in flowers is just to dip your brush in paint, set the outside petal or the outside edge of the flower of the petal, and then pull it towards the center. So pull your brush towards the center of that shape, and it'll allow you to have really nice long petals to each of the flowers, right? So keep in mind there's no right or wrong way to do this. Some people do it towards them, some people do it away from them. So it's however you feel the most comfortable. But the idea is to just give them all 5 long petals in a comfortable space. Keep in mind we're doing this also with 2 coats. So what that means is I'm going through all the flowers one time, then allowing them to dry in between, and then on the second go around, I'll go over them all over again. So I'm just making sure that everything's solid and everything's bright, at least the things that are sitting on top of other things. And since the flowers will be with the color Polar Bear, which is the lightest of the colors, right? I want to make sure that they are not translucent. I just want to also point out, when I was doing my first go around of the flowers, I did not notice that I was so close to the piece, but that's sometimes what helps me feel the most confident, is to have the piece closest to my body. So unfortunately that cuts me out of the camera screen, or of the screen, you know? So it's kind of hard to see me doing them here, but on my second go around, on my second coat, you'll see it all a little bit better. But just know I'm doing all the flowers the same way, and as I'm rotating my piece, that just means that it's an easier way to get to a petal or get a shape or whatever I'm trying to work out. So just know that you don't have to hold your piece just down. You can actually grab it, move it around, make it work for you, make it comfortable for you. And here I am doing my second coat. As you see, the flowers are already drying, so you can see the color underneath, and I'm just trying to avoid that. It doesn't have to be super solid, but just enough to give the flower some solidity and some difference from the background itself. Alrighty, so next we're going to use the detail brush and polar bear, but before we do that, we're going to use a pencil first, and we're going to sketch the orange's endocarps, which is the pulpy inside of the orange. It's right underneath the rind. So these ones will be done in the same form as the flowers, just as we painted the flowers, but instead of painting the whole flower, we're just going to be outlining them in. So keep in mind, I pretty much sketched the same flower. I started off with the center, I gave it a couple petals. For the halves, I did 4 petals, and for the other ones, I did 5 petals. So it's really no wrong or right way. If you feel like 4 petals is too much and they won't fit in your oranges, that's okay. Lessen them. That's not a big deal at all. So all we're doing now is just sketching them out with a pencil, trying to figure out how we want them to look, just kind of have an idea on how they're going to look. And then once we like them and once we're good to go, we're just going to start painting them. So you can just start off with the center and then start painting each petal, each petal's outline as you're going, and try to keep it simple. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Don't worry if it's not skinny. We do want it to have a little bit of thickness to it. Just remember to do 2 coats on there, so that way it's really bright and we can see it after we're finished. so next we're going to be using the detail brush to paint some highlights on the orange rind, and we're also going to paint some highlights and things like that around the oranges that are cut in half. This is really not there's no right or wrong way to do this part either. This is just really just to give the oranges a little bit of an extra accent. So what I did is I just went either the opposite end of where I did my red little highlight or red little dashes, right? I either went the opposite side or the same side. I really don't know if I have any preference on which side they get done. It just has to be a little highlight added. It kind of creates the pores as accents and whatnot on the oranges rind. So yeah, so just a couple little dots here and there. It'll be really nice and it'll make everything tie in together and stand out. Alrighty, so next we're going to rinse off the detail brush, and with it we're going to paint the stems and the leaves with 1 to 2 coats of Kermit. On the sample, we made the leaves sprouting from the oranges larger and the leaves near the flowers smaller. So when I was sketching them out, you saw that I talked about that as well. Just keep in mind that they don't have to be too tight. So if you feel like there's too many leaves or you feel like there's not enough space, don't worry about them. put them wherever you have space. Make sure that you kind of use the sketches you already planned out to give you an idea on how things would look, and if not, change them up however you feel the most comfortable. Just add some leaves on there, make it fun. So next we're going to use the medium brush to paint the handle and the mason jar top of the pitcher with 2 coats of Nantucket blue. So here you see I grabbed my medium brush again. That's one of my favorite brushes. And now I'm just going to paint the handle, and I'm going to be doing about 2 coats on there. I want them to be pretty solid. Just keep in mind I'm doing the handle first because it'll help me once I'm painting the top. I can grab it by the handle again. Also, it allows me time for the flowers to dry and I'm not touching anything wet. So now I'm going to be painting the top of the pitcher. So you see right here, I'm trying to be kind of careful so that way I don't paint on the inside. Because inside I'm going to use Q-tips to paint, to finish that rim off on the inside of the jar. Also keep in mind that this is one of those things that's just as well one of those it's up to you kind of thing. So it's really as you wish. So if you want to have dots on the inside, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I know we have some painters that don't enjoy scallops and some that do. So it really just depends on what you want to see. I wanted to give the top of the jar kind of a good clean look. And I just felt like this was the easiest way to achieve that. Alrighty, so next, what we're going to do is we're going to grab Q-tips again, but this time we're going to paint the dots on the inside of the flowers or on the center of the flowers. And as you see, I'm being kind of careful. I don't want my paint to drip, so I'm paying attention to where I'm going. I'm also gripping that handle real well to ensure that the mug or the jar doesn't slip from me, and I don't accidentally get blue somewhere where I don't want it to be. All right, so before the next step, I made sure to let my jar dry a little bit so that way I can grab it real well and ensure that I'm not touching anything wet. Also make sure that I'm able to do all my detailing comfortably. So just if you need to set it aside to dry for a couple minutes, this is the perfect time to do that before you get started on detailing. Shake it off before you start. Make sure to stretch yourself real nice and wide, and then grab some black lab, a detail brush, and let's get to the outlining portion. So this is pretty much almost the end. I love to detail with a black brush, or I like to detail with a detail brush. I like to outline things this way. Something to note though is that I do add a little bit of water to my paint, and this is way too much paint that I don't know why I poured onto my paint palette, but here we are, this is what we're doing. And clearly I added too much water because it became kind of runny. So it's just a couple droplets of water, and then stir your paint really well before continuing. And also I just want to note that that's only if you feel like your paint is thick, and like when you're painting your strikes or your stripes, your lines or whatever, the paint kind of gives out on you. If you feel like you could, you have the ability to let it go a little longer, add a few droplets of water to loosen it up. Make sure to stir it really well. We're not looking for the consistency of that watercolor that we created at the beginning. We're looking for more like ink. So more like chocolate milk kind of level, where it's just a nice, not super thick, not super thin, just a nice in between. And yeah, and then you just use your detail brush, the tippy top of the detail brush. Try not to press too hard. Also something I note too is that I like to start off with a skinny line and then thicken up as I go. So sometimes you'll see me do that. And I also, if I have any spots where I feel uncomfortable and don't know how to go about it, I will grab my piece in a different way. So like I'd rotate it upside down, or I go at it at a different angle. And these are all just techniques to make you feel more comfortable, or make myself feel more comfortable while I'm doing details and things like that. I also try not to add any details on small things. So I try that. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I really try. So what I would suggest is just don't do any of the lines on the larger leaves. Only do that for the smaller leaves. Don't do any of those lines on the smaller leaves. Only leave that for the larger leaves where you have the most space. Yeah, so apart from that, this part is really fun and really easy. All you got to do is loosen up. Make sure that you remember it doesn't have to be perfect. There's really no way to make an orange perfect. That's just against nature. It's going to be funky. It's going to be your own, and that's what matters. The part here is about enjoying what you're doing, being in the moment, being in the understanding of what you got, what your hand is up to, how your hand is moving, how everything's looking, kind of getting some ideas on how to make things better in the future, because you have a couple more flowers and oranges to paint, right? Just try to find the ways that it's the most comfortable to you, and really have fun with this part. This is my favorite thing, detailing and adding those final details. It's one of my top favorite things in any project. Hi, hello. Hi. Okay, so in this part, I know that we've been outlining for a while, okay? So it's okay if you need to take a break. It's okay if you need to stop. It's okay if you need to shake it off. Whatever you need is totally fine. If you feel like you're getting feeling pressure or feeling scared for anything, or you want to let things dry as well before you carry on, please feel the most confident to do so. This is totally your project. You want it to look good, so you trust yourself to make those kind of tough choices, okay? So here I'm just outlining, still doing the same thing. Remember, you can pause this at any point and you can carry on at any point as well. So hi, hello again. I just realized as I was finishing this piece that I didn't do a step, which is not totally the end of the world or anything. I will make sure to do it on my piece after I'm done here. But so with the back of the detail brush or the back of the small round brush or medium round brush, whichever round brush you have, go ahead and add little dots around the picture with the Kermit color. This is just totally one of those little things that I kind of forgot to do, and it's just a little accents wherever you feel like you need to fill the space, okay? And apart from that, here's a little close-up of our painted piece as well as our fired version. Thank you so much for painting with me today. Have a great day, and bye-bye.